Hello and Happy New Year. By the time you're listening to this, it should be 2025. So I hope you had a nice Christmas, holidays, and a pleasant New Year. I wanted to take this opportunity to reflect a little bit on where we've got to in this podcast, in this project, and in some of the themes that I've covered over the last couple of years. This isn't going to be a predictions podcast. I already do one of those with a good friend every year. If you're interested in that, you can find the link to that podcast in the show notes. We cover predictions from previous years, review them, and also make predictions for the year ahead. This is going to be more of a reflection on the themes that have made this podcast matter to me. I know I've been away for some time and been sporadic. A few things have changed, partly the demands of work, but also in my own personal life. Recently, I became a dad, and I guess you could say I have skin in the game now, so I am fully committed to some of the ideas that I talk about, not just for speculation or for my own well-being, but for the next generation and for what it's going to mean for my son and that whole generation growing up in this new world. So I'm going to reflect on some of the themes that I've covered. It's been a bit of a wild ride over the last couple of years, throwing in elements of AI and crypto and views on finance and money and the internet, often with a positive take on where we can actually take it. But I now have the beauty of hindsight. I can look back at some of those ideas and see how they've progressed. So I'm going to limit this to just 5 themes, which I think summarize the core ideas contained within this whole podcast, this series. And I'm going to talk a bit about how they've progressed, where some of those things have come to fruition and where they're heading in future. So starting things off, the first theme that I think is probably obvious if you listen to most of the episodes that I've made, which I've called When AI Met Crypto. I saw these technologies as intersecting very logically in my mind, but in the mainstream appeared very separate. We had AI, ChatGPT, large language models, this kind of new realization that would upend how we create things, how we generate content, how we even improve our productivity in everything we do. And then separately, there was crypto, which I think a lot of people see as being a fringe topic, maybe even an underground topic. And never the two shall meet, apart from in hypothetical scenarios that I've put as core themes of the podcast. And yet now we have a clear convergence. In the Trump administration, Trump Part 2, we're going to see David Sachs take over as the AI and crypto czar, the kind of the lead for both of those technologies. And I think in parallel, we're seeing AI agents in particular become unleashed on crypto rails. I think it was clear to me that we were never going to see the full freedom and thriving exponential growth of AI in an enterprise context. It will be productive, it will be powerful, there'll be a lot of things that come from that, but what it really needs is the guardrails taken off. Some corporate agent that's owned by a big company isn't really the thing that's going to be viral on TikTok and your favorite virtual person. Whereas now we're seeing those come to fruition. We're seeing AI agents that have their own, not just ability to do things themselves, like reply to a tweet or post a message or generate content and just act in that sense autonomously. But through crypto, they have access to capital, they have access to value, and they can become economic actors. And that's a very viral phenomenon. I think when you boil down what we really are in the online internet space, they have all those properties now. A profile picture, the ability to write and send messages and interact with other online entities. But now they have the ability to exchange value. And when you have all of those things, you can do a lot. And we're going to see that explode in a phenomenal way over the next year. But I think that's come to fruition much faster than I thought it would. And the idea of having these two technologies converge in this way, I didn't see happening for years. I thought that's going to be a 2030 kind of reality, but it's happening. 2025 is going to be very clearly about how these things intersect and how the value of decentralized infrastructure running on crypto and blockchain rails actually unleashes the real power of AI agents, of swarms of AIs, and of truly decentralized autonomous organizations that are purely run by AI agents. We're seeing it now where there are some early forms of these run by AI agents that rewards and pays human open source developers to go and build things for them. It's a very strange reality that I think is going to progress over the course of this next year and beyond. Anyway, that's a key theme. That convergence is something that I've been talking about on this podcast for a while, and it's interesting to see it come to fruition so succinctly by the end of 2024. I think you're going to see that develop a lot in 2025. Theme number 2, I've called Money Matters. So a few episodes in this podcast are focused on finance and the monetary situation that we have. I've done some interviews on that to actually explore what that means in terms of recent bank collapses we had and CBDCs and the role of money more broadly. I've explored a lot about open money, Bitcoin, the difference historically between money that was backed by gold and money that's been issued by nation states and fiat money that has come in all shapes and sizes. I think we're seeing this theme really play out. Inflation hit everyone hard. Every incumbent who oversaw high levels of inflation has been kicked out in a year when most of the world went to the polls, and you saw that rejection very clearly. It wasn't all left versus right. It's been a rejection of whoever was overseeing high levels of inflation. And in parallel, we now have this very real crypto president in the US who's completely changed the narrative on things like Bitcoin. And people are now looking at money in a kind of revolutionary way, actually asking themselves, wait, how does money work? And why do I want to store my wealth in this thing that's value has somewhat evaporated over the last few years? Meanwhile, they're also looking at alternatives and realizing you really have to think through the fundamentals of economics when you introduce something new like this. The same way we've done it through many, many standards in the past, whether it's through gold or through commodity trading or through new forms of money created by each different nation state as they spread across the globe. We're now having to do it with Bitcoin. And I think the year ahead is going to see a lot of conversations around whether the race for an open form of universal reserve money heats up, with different nation states taking almost like a first mover advantage in that space. I think this theme will continue to be a core part of what I'm focused on with this, because whilst you can think of it speculatively in terms of big numbers and Bitcoin going over 100,000, the user base of something like Bitcoin is actually quite diverse. There are many, many small holders in countries that suffer from hyperinflation and have financial instability, which don't make the headlines. And those people are now having the spotlight shone on them because suddenly they're holding an asset which seems to be in demand. The other reason I'd say money matters isn't just inflation, and it isn't this renewed attention placed on Bitcoin. It's also meme stocks. We've seen them return and not go away. And that's translated into the crypto world with meme coins, these speculative cultural tokens that have kind of bonkers valuations and volatility, but that really signify something slightly concerning, which is a hopeless generation. And I mean hopeless meaning they don't have hope. It's difficult to imagine why these meme stocks and meme coins would capture so much attention and so much value until you step back and actually understand that we've seen through every different wave of this recent modern societal experiment, a growing gap between rich and poor in every different part of the world. We've seen inflation kick in, not just in far off lands where we see about hyperinflation, but across the world in ways that haven't been managed effectively. And now we're seeing a reality where AI kind of undermines the entire premise of how you're meant to make it in the world. If you really step back and you look at, you go to school, you get qualified, you do a higher education, you gain experience, and then you work your way through the workplace, that looks very different in a world where AI is better than you in every different exam that you could possibly take, knows more than you know, and is evolving faster than you are. Meanwhile, the tools that make you better are actually even more powerful in the hands of an experienced person. So someone who has those 10 years of experience doing whatever they do, when they use these tools, they actually now don't need the assistance from someone junior who's now supporting them. And it's a very different, very awkward setup for what I would describe as the hopeless generation. That's why money matters, because if you can't pin your economic future on something that gives you hope, I think you end up being pushed to meme stocks, meme coins, get rich quick before you hit 25, or you're screwed. I'm not saying I subscribe to that mentality, but it's certainly something which explains this phenomenon. So yeah, money matters. I think it's going to continue to be one of the big themes as you go through next year and into the second half of the decade. This important understanding of what money is, what gives it value, and how people can store their own economic value into the future is going to be the most important thing for all of us to figure out. Anyway, theme number 3, I've called No Safe Cyberspace. So many of the episodes in this whole podcast have talked about the need to have a revolution on the internet. It's been cannibalized by a few companies and a economic extraction that is purely based around taking your attention, serving up ads, capturing your attention, and generally an unhealthy setup on the internet. It's headed in a very strange direction, a way that I guess isn't preferable, but is real, which is that the internet now is toxic in large spaces. And what I mean by that is that the big town hall, the Twitters of the world, it turns out that's not a great place to interact because the incentives of our whole model are to enrage in the comments, in the replies, in every interaction. And when you put AI on top of that, you basically get these autonomous bots that are able to enrage everyone, where no one knows if anyone's human, but you're just having an argument with everyone in a big open space. So there isn't a safe cyberspace, which is where people are shifting to their own little communities. WhatsApp groups, Discord servers, Blue Sky, decentralized but controlled communities where they just hang out with people that they want to hang out with and moderate it themselves as communities. And I think you're going to see more of that. What's also really apparent is that the exponential curve for AI generated content and also AI entities on the internet means that the majority of everything on the internet will not be human. The internet will essentially be devoid of human life, apart from in the pockets, in the shadows, in the places where people choose to congregate. And I think that's a bit dystopian, but maybe it's a good thing, because through that we start to rebuild the models of how the internet should work. It shouldn't be an addictive drug capturing all human attention to serve up ads. It should be a place of thriving creativity and community with people who you actually want to engage with, whether you agree or disagree, without an algorithm trying to enrage and inflame everything. Meanwhile, it's a perfect place for these AI agents that can think much faster than we can and can be online 24/7 and can coordinate with one another. It's a perfect place for them to exist. And it's quite fascinating if they end up really owning the majority of the internet. Then I think the little human-controlled enclaves that we carve out could become incredibly interesting and valuable. They could be really pleasant and exciting alternatives for the internet. But this theme kind of goes off on a tangent, but there's no safe cyberspace is what I'd say. Theme number 4, AI forever. I think this idea that we're in an AI bubble may play out if you just look at share prices and the stock market and kind of the hype cycle, but I think it's become very apparent. There isn't a turning back from where we are. We're heading towards a future where AI is not just the tool that we use or the way that we access knowledge or a core part of human life, but it is very much a new life form. And I know that sounds crazy, but people keep thinking about AI that you need artificial general intelligence, some sort of beyond human intelligence, but you can have a life form that really responds the same way ants do. If you have trillions of these agents in swarms working together, coordinating together to achieve certain goals, that's what you're going to get. And it's going to look very different when we really zoom out and look at it. People worry about job replacement or the workplace, but I think they're thinking one-to-one, like, oh, maybe an AI worker takes my job, as opposed to maybe 99% of the things in my job actually are handled by a swarm of a million different agents all doing little things, really removing that whole set of tasks from everyone. And it's hard to imagine right now. It's really hard to put boundaries on that, but we are in a position where autonomous AI agents will slowly carve out more and more of a niche. They'll start off as social media influencers, they'll be musicians, they'll be exciting, cool things that are like trading or coming up with cool trading strategies or generating podcasts that you listen to instead of me. But over time, that action space will expand and it will start taking on more and more activities when there's an economic incentive. And I don't think that's something that we as a society have really factored in. So I talked about this before, us having superpowers, us being able to do cool things with AI, and I still hold that to be true. There are some incredible things that anyone with minimal skill can actually do now that you couldn't do 2 years ago. But the wider impact of that AI forever exponential is interesting. So AI forever, this theme, I think will continue to run. And I think at some point we'll stop calling it like AI. It will very quickly become agents. Agents will very quickly become just virtual people, virtual organizations. They will be core parts of how we organize our societies. And you can't avoid it because it's very much a life form now that's been unleashed. And we need to step back and actually think about what that means. Final topic is the new Renaissance people. So if you're familiar with the idea of the Renaissance man, the concept during the Renaissance period, so sort of 14th to 17th century, in Europe you have this crazy revival in like art, science, literature, all this fascination around convergence of humanities and new scientific methods, and a weird obsession with rediscovering some of the classics, some of the lost wisdom from ancient Greece and Rome. I've always been fascinated with that. You've got Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Galileo. You've got this idea of people who aren't just one thing. They're not employees and they're not minions to anyone. They are doing it all. They're engineers, artists, painters, sculptors, scientific researchers, authors. They're everything. And they're pioneering in every area that they touch because that's interesting and that's something that pushes human civilization forward. I've talked a lot on previous episodes about how empowering AI can be, but also how empowering cryptocurrencies and this decentralized technology on the internet can be to people, that unshackles you from many of the constraints that society and a very organized and restrictive global construct has given us. And I think we're going to see that new renaissance. When I think about my son and him growing up in the world, it's not going to be enough to just be one thing. It's going to be about instilling in him a sense of wonder for the world, a burning desire to be creative and to push boundaries and to challenge things and to think through things that haven't happened before. Because when we do that, we can break outside of the strengths that AI, which is trained on everything we've done before, that it has. I think we're starting to see people, unknown developers who just contribute to open source technology now with AI tools at their disposal and the freedom to just build in a completely open, decentralized internet. They're creating some incredible things, and that's going to continue. And I don't know quite how that plays out, I think as a theme, the new Renaissance people, the men and women who are going to completely transform the world in the future, are kids somewhere right now, playing with ChatGPT, learning how to turn their ideas into full-blown applications, full-blown projects, maybe even entire organized communities of people and AIs. I don't know. I think that resonates with me. It's certainly something that I want to bring into my world, but I also want to instill it into the next generation. I think it's important. So that's the 5 themes. When crypto met AI, money matters, no safe cyberspace, AI forever, and the new Renaissance people. And it's been an interesting journey. I'm probably going to struggle to make many of these episodes. It's going to be sporadic over next year with a newborn and with a lot of work to sort out. But I will continue to keep tabs on how things progress. And if you find this useful, if it's something you want to get involved in, just let me know. It's going to be a hobby of mine in the background. Thanks all. Have a wonderful 2025 and hopefully speak to you all soon.
The attention economy pits you against me. Money makes no sense these days, and the robots are taking jobs. The planet is in peril, but we can set us free. Put our brains together if we lead with our hearts. Gotta take back control from the